And welcome back to Crypto Maniac. I would love to just start off by saying, and maybe it's getting a bit repetitive, but honestly, the love and support that's been coming through has been great. Again, I realize it's a small following, but we're really just getting started here. I think I've made about a week and a half to 2 weeks worth of content so far, and the rate of growth has been pretty crazy. And yeah, again, the comments and support have been really great. So thank you all for that. Specifically to like Sabo Beats, who's been around since the very first video, Lennon Systems, Computer Guru, and many more. So super great to see, and thank you. Now, I've mentioned before that I would love to see this grow, and to be honest, something that I haven't mentioned before is that this is all a little bit of an experiment. So I haven't actually told any more than one person that I'm even doing this at all. So this one person knows, but what I'd kind of like to do is just to sort of see, now how big can this kind of thing get? Now I see a lot of people just doing pretty much the same thing, and the intent of this is to aggregate some of that and not just to do exactly the same thing. So I have mentioned before that I would love to grow it so that we can do something a little bit more dynamic and interesting, which I think is in your best interest, because I think you would love to see some of this entertaining material. I would definitely love to do the work. And instead of just preaching to the crypto choir, I would love to actually do something that actually engages an audience and brings new people to the crypto space to kind of make it fun, interesting, and educational all at the same time. So please do continue liking and sharing to help spread the word. And again, I think it's a great place where we can learn from each other, from some of the comments that I'm seeing. I'm also learning stuff as well, which is great. So again, thanks for that and keep it up. Now, big topic of the moment, of course, is Bitcoin as it rages onward toward the $10,000 mark finally, which we're all super excited to see. And I've seen some really interesting comments just to sort of say, why is everybody making such a big deal out of Bitcoin when it's only gone over 10 times within this year from January to now, whereas something like Ethereum is up somewhere between 45 to 50 times what it was in January. That said, obviously Bitcoin is at $10,000 or knocking at the door thereof, and Ethereum is climbing up to 500. Both great, but I'm not going to take sides here. I'm exposed to both, so I'm pretty happy about that. But basically, the topic of today is we're reaching 10,000 and what comes next, and how are you going to play it, and what are your potential strategies for that? Now, a lot of people have been thinking that, well, it's a big barrier to overcome right now, and what's going to happen once we reach that threshold? Are we just going to come tumbling back down to something? Who knows? One thing that I'd kind of like to draw your attention to is this little site called bitcoinity.org. Now, here it outlines a list of different exchanges and the relative value of Bitcoin, as well as the order book, so that you can sort of get an idea of what's coming down the line, where there's selling pressure coming up in the future, and where there's relative support for that. So just zooming out a little bit so that we can see here. Now, as we look on this side, now that corresponds directly with $10,000. Now, guess what? That huge psychological barrier is a big deal, and a lot of people have always had the idea in mind that for them, I think even towards the beginning of the year when we were crossing the $1,000 mark, everybody talks about these cryptocurrencies are going to absolutely go to the moon. Where is the moon? That's different for everybody, but for a lot of people, I think that was $10,000. And so there have been a lot of people that have been in the game for a little while that maybe don't really pay as much attention as perhaps you and I, and have just put that order in the order book, walk away, forget about it. So there's that, but there is also that other contingent that is really interested to see $10,000 and to also maybe start taking a bit of a profit, or maybe expecting that we're going to hit a ceiling of $10,000, come crashing down, just so that they can actually make a short play out of that. But regardless of what you think, let's just take a look here. $10,000 is clearly a barrier here. Now, just to explain this a little bit further, if you scroll down, you can see different exchanges listed here. So BitMEX, obviously showing that clear $10,000 mark. Bitfinex, also on the left is the buying power, and this is the selling power. So it really does slope off quite considerably looking at everything in total here. Now on GDAX, obviously that is quite pronounced. So there's an absolute wall sitting at $10,000. Now the landscape is a little bit different than it was before. Now what you're looking at here is the chart of Bitcoin from January 2017 up until now, and you can see this is a pretty aggressive looking chart where we topped out at around $1,000 for the very first time since 2013, right here in January 2017, just the beginning of this year. And now again, we're knocking at the door of 10,000. So the question is, what's going to happen and what can we learn by looking perhaps back in time? So as I often say, if we zoom out a little bit, perhaps we'll gain a little bit more perspective. So here running up from the summer into the holiday season. Now the holiday season was pretty generous with us last year, so we're all, I think, hopeful that the same is going to continue. But here we had this pretty massive run up from about 800 bucks straight up through, call it 11, just under 1150 or so. Now the $1,000 mark is right here. Now we stopped briefly here just below 1,000, took a small dip and then plowed right on through it, but then just to come all the way back down to close to 750. So as we look ahead, there's a little bit that lines up with the $1,000 mark, maybe around here and maybe around here, but otherwise it kind of dipped a little bit below and kind of plowed through over top of that. Now coming up through to the next marker, which would be the $2,000 mark, we see here again the same sort of thing where it was maybe a little bit before that became this barrier, and then again a little bit later on this support line. So that appears to be a pretty common kind of a pattern, and right now just looking at the daily chart here, we are definitely having a bit of a pause just shy of the $10,000 psychological barrier. Now the landscape has changed a little bit, as I mentioned. So we've got these CME futures that everyone is excited about. We've got the Big Bang Theory that's going to expose a lot more people to the idea of Bitcoin. Hopefully Google searches will go up, which usually corresponds to the price also going up. So I think we all want that. But it does appear that it's a little different now. So that says to me, on bitcoinity.org, for example, with that giant wall of 10,000, that's going to trigger an awful lot of sell orders. So the question is, how far down will that go? Or is there enough interest in the space right now that will just plow through the $10,000 mark onto, who knows what, 12,000? Could it go to 15,000 before it actually takes a major correct? That is really the question right now. But with all the FOMO, or fear of missing out, that comes into play, what happens if you actually go ahead and take a short position at 10,000 and then get locked out of $2,000 more potential gain that you will be missing out on? That would really hurt. And perhaps, I don't know, will it come back down then to 10,000 so that you would be able to buy back in again? That's the big question right now. So I guess your choices are, you could try that, but it would be a really aggressive move. You could try that maybe with a portion of your holdings, or you could potentially just sit tight and just see what happens. Now, historically, had you just held on to everything that you had, you would have landed on your feet pretty darn well. And I think if you're one of those people watching who's been in the space from January 2017 or earlier, I think you're doing pretty darn well and are pretty happy to see all of this happen, even with the big mood swings of 30 to 40% loss that can happen over the period of a couple of days. Now we're definitely starting to get a bit overheated here, as it turns out, and using some other tools here, for example. So if we just use something like the RSI, or Relative Strength Index, actually we can just make this a little bit larger here just for illustration. So this is just from October until right now, so effectively a 2-month period right now. And we can see that we've entered into overbought territory several times, where we take a little bit of a dip and then sometimes a little bit more of a significant dip. So certainly I get the psychological aspect of buying Bitcoin right now at or very close to $10,000, but it is starting to feel a little overextended. But again, it's really anybody's guess, and there are a ton of technical indicators out there and channels devoted to just doing that it really is hard to tell. Now, other things to keep in mind, of course, I almost like to see this sort of negative press that Bitcoin gets. There's a video that I twat out a little bit ago about the CEO of Overstock trying to convince the people of Fox Business that Bitcoin is actually worth something. And there's a huge argument that ensues between the virtues of hanging on to fiat and its relative value, gold, and of course Bitcoin. And this poor guy just tries over and over to explain it to them, and they just don't get it. Now, these are supposed to be financial experts, and as long as there are still enough people out there that just don't understand Bitcoin, that means that you're still getting cheap Bitcoin, because the moment that barrier is crossed, that is when the floodgates are going to open, all theoretical, of course, and that is when you're going to see the price of Bitcoin go absolutely parabolic. And I think we're really starting to see that just slowly starting to trickle in, which will hopefully turn into a barrage later on. But again, there are just so many things that it's hard to tell. And again, once we get into overbought territory, everyone's getting really excited that the price is going up really fast. And that is maybe a time to exercise a little bit of caution, take a step back and sort of analyze what's going on. Maybe it is a good time to even scale out a portion and then potentially buy back in a little bit later. But that is definitely the, at the moment, $10,000 question. Now, just to understand the fundamentals of Bitcoin, whether you're a super ultra Bitcoin expert or just getting into the space, there's a great resource that just hit the internet yesterday from Trace Mayer, who is a huge proponent of the space. He's been around for a really long time. He's put this article together, and I can link that in the description below, but it effectively goes through a history of him in the space, as well as some of the fundamentals. Security is a huge issue right now, speculative elements, but also this, which I think is kind of good to know, and that is, we know that Bitcoin is capped at 21 million. So that's the maximum number of Bitcoin that will ever be out there at all. But one thing that a lot of people don't consider is how much Bitcoin has already been lost. Now, when it was worth nothing and people had hundreds, perhaps even thousands on their computers, there are a lot of stories, a lot of sob stories about people who have just thrown their computers away thinking, you know what, these thousands of Bitcoin are worth like 20 bucks right now. What am I gonna do with them? They just toss them. Years later, come back to see what the price of Bitcoin is at and obviously have probably a pretty good cry. But going beyond that, he also goes on to talk about the rate of growth of Bitcoin and relative to Coinbase, for example, who has been a very good metric for us. As the biggest exchange on the market right now, their rate of growth is absolutely insane. They hit a ceiling, I think, of about 100,000 new user subscriptions in one day, in one 24-hour period. But I think that they're kind of reaching the spot right now where they're at somewhere around 75,000 new accounts per day. So new customers every single day. Now keep in mind, that's just one exchange. So there really is a ton of hype and FOMO entering into the market right now. Obviously, that's a good thing for the long term. For the short term, we'll see how overextended that gets and how greedy people get. It is an irrational market after all. And on that note, of course, there is a ton of publicity coming out right now. The media is all over it, and they all tend to do the same thing, which is when the good news starts to flow, it's absolutely everywhere. So here, for example, even on Forbes, 5 reasons Bitcoin will be your best high growth investment for 2018. And from today's standpoint, there's really no reason to doubt that it will just be absolutely explosive. But time will tell, and we'll just have to see how that happens. One thing that I think is definitely worth considering is that there are still issues in the space. One of them is, of course, the feud that continues to rage on between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theory rolling around right now, but it remains to be seen how that's actually going to play out, because they still are, at the end of the day, competing currencies. And so that could potentially make a lot of new investors a little bit wary and potentially confused as to which one is actually Bitcoin. And with interviews like what's circulating this morning, it's not hard to see why. Now, I don't want to give this a ton of airtime, but this is effectively how the interview turns out, with Roger Ver just flipping off this other guy. Now, there's a lot of back and forth, but anyway, this looks like contention in the space to me. That's all I'm gonna say on that. And aside from the drama on YouTube today, there are still some scaling issues that have yet to be solved. That said, of course, Lightning is on its way, and supposedly on its way faster than expected. So that will make transactions tons quicker and a lot more cost effective, which is the problem that's plaguing Bitcoin at the moment. So those are really exciting things to see come down the line. And if that actually comes to fruition, then we'll definitely be in absolutely amazing shape and we'll be, I think, more bullish than ever before. And just to finish out today's video, there has been some discussion over the last couple of videos that I've made specific to Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond that have been coming out. And so finally Bitcoin Gold is listed where it should be now that we've got a circulating supply of Bitcoin Gold, and it's landed on spot number 5, despite having a few difficulties, just to put it lightly. So one thing that I should say very specifically is that there have been specific issues to the wallet that has been published on the Bitcoin Gold website. Now, a lot of those have been hacked, and so that's a super quick way to lose your Bitcoin Gold. My recommendation is if you're going to sell it, just send it then directly to an exchange and do it there. Or if you've got a Ledger hardware wallet or a KeepKey or a Trezor or something else, just leave it on there and forget about it. Now the question is, will Bitcoin Gold actually maintain its value? Will it grow? It's really hard to say, but I mean, having landed at spot number 5, probably by virtue of the fact that it's even right there under the top 5, it'll probably continue to do well. And I mean, it's been less than smooth, I think we can all agree, and still it's right there. So I mean, that gives it a ton of attention and sort of validates its existence even in some way. So remains to be seen where Bitcoin Diamond lands, but at a 10-to-1 ratio, we're effectively getting 10 Bitcoin Diamond per Bitcoin held on your hardware wallet or wherever it is that you keep yours. But maybe there's an association with Bitcoin, and maybe that even causes some confusion, and perhaps the association with gold and relative value. I don't know, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. In any event, it remains to be seen where those are going to go, but all I have to say is, looking back, man, I kind of wish now that I would have held on to my Ethereum Classic coins. I did sell them relatively cheaply. I mean, they just hung around the $1 to $2 range for such a long time, and they did absolutely zero. To be honest, I sold quite a bit of my Bitcoin Cash a while back and kind of now wish I had hung on to it. I've still got some, so I'm in decent shape, but one of those things where I just wish that I had perhaps just done nothing. But you just can't know these things at the time, and of course these things could absolutely just go to zero. But in the end, it is free money, so I might at least, just according to the video that I put out just a little while ago, maybe even just sell a portion of something just to actually realize some gains, and then just let the rest of it fly as just effectively free money. So on that note, I would be very curious in the comments below to hear what your plan is for 10K Bitcoin. What's gonna happen there exactly? Once it reaches 10K, are you planning to sell all, some, none, hodl? What's the plan? And how do you feel about your Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin Diamond? Let me know what your strategy is. I'm still thinking about what to do, but man, it does seem tempting to throw some of it off of my ledger onto an exchange and maybe just even play with a little bit of it, but it is dicey business. So let me know in the comments below. As always, please do like and share, and continue to keep the conversation going in the comments below. Now, of course, I've seen a lot of gimmicky endings, so I kind of want to stay away from that. But on that note, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.